Obedience is a prerequisite for transformation. Obedience is a requirement for shifts. Obedience is a requirement for a change in level, for a transitioning, for a shaping, for the new. Obedience is a prerequisite. And unfortunately, a lot of us downplay on this powerful attitude called obedience. Obedience is a requirement for a shift. So disobedient prayer warriors do not experience shifts because you can pray and not be obedient. It means that you can mark out the regular attendance in church, but if you are disobedient, you can't experience a transformation. So obedience is a requirement for shift. His mother said to the servants, whatever, mark that word, whatever, that is, whatever he tells you, do it. It doesn't matter whether you understand it. It doesn't matter whether you haven't. It doesn't matter whether you can understand the process, but do it. Many of us like to understand before we do, but in Jesus' businesses, if you are interested in miracle, you don't need to understand, do it. I remember, I think there was a testimony that was shared this morning. Last month's edition of Refresh. The testimony was going on, a testimony was read here after the whole prayers and all of that. And when the testimony was talked about a lady who had different prayer points, and one of it was she wanted to get pregnant. She had been having miscarriages. And she was finally glad to announce that she's pregnant. I had a prompting in my spirit. Please, can you help me with this mic? And I just had a prompting in my spirit that if you know you are believing God for pregnancy, just place your hand right there. It wasn't even the right, we were not even praying, it was testimony time. And somehow, some persons obeyed, whatever. But somebody came to testify, got a testimony a few days ago, that she's finally here to say that she's pregnant. She didn't understand, she did not see, it could even be that she had not met her husband in a while. It could even be that her wombs were not put together. We want all the conditions to be right before we understand, before we do. But he said that even when you don't understand the conditions for the miracle, just do. We want the conditions, we want the weather to be right. We think that is our functions, our organs that make it happen. We think that everything has to be put together. So we want to understand it. We want it to be sensible, but obedience is senseless to human self. We want it to make sense, but obedience cannot make sense. We want it to be right. Everything has to meet. Oh, how do you explain that two persons who don't have the right, medical reports get married and they give birth? You don't know. How do you even explain that you don't need to take medication, but you can be healed? How do you explain that cancer cell can dry up and you don't go for chemotherapy and all the therapy? How do you explain it that they've told you that you are late? It's not possible for you to get married. But he's saying, whatever he says, do it. The problem is we like to analyze the sayings before we do, and we miss it because obedience comes with urgency. It's an emergency. Your response to God, to his instructions, comes with urgency. Many of us are downplaying on the instructions of God because we like it to make sense. He has told you many times, go and run that program. You are still sitting. He will replace you. Some of you are still there, you are sitting. He tells you, go and start that business. You are looking for the capital. Obedience is the capital. It is on the way to receiving the supernatural capital that the physical one comes. We like it to make sense, but obedience is a prerequisite for transformation. Obedience is a prerequisite for miracles. He tells you, I have been, somebody reached out to me and said, she didn't know for any reason, but she had a prompt in her spirit for her to call. God just told her, she woke up she had a dream, and when she woke up in the morning, God told her, place this call. She said, but she has never called this person before. He says, I'm telling you, call. And she called. And then in fact, by the time she called, the person said, it's been a long time. What can I do for you? And she tabled her request, and it was done immediately. Oh, but I don't know. I've not been in touch. I don't even have this person. We give too many. Obedience is void of excuses. Whatever he says to you, he told you to go and launch the album. You are still playing. He told you to go and open that company. You are still like, oh, but how can I do it? It's not possible for me to do it. Obedience is a capital. Obedience is a requirement for a shift. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. So instructions are not fulfilled by strangers, they are fulfilled by servants. Whatever he says to you, do it. Let's go to verse 6. Now, there were set there 6 water pots of stone according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or gallons a piece. So what that means is that 6 water pots of stone, very heavy water pots of stone. Now, the first water pot of stone contains about 20 or 30 pieces of gallon piece. You know what jerrycan is? Jerrycan. Some of you know it as jerrycan. You know it as jerrycan. But you know it as gallons. You understand jerrycan, right? So imagine, even if it's 10 liters, 20 liters, just imagine you carrying 20 pieces of those gallons. So fill just one water pot. Amen. Some of us that don't have muzzle, you should have muzzle by that time. So according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons a piece, Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them there. Let's go back to verse 6. There were 6. So he did not ask them to look for another object or tools. He used the available. He didn't say, oh, go outside the event center and go and get something. He used the available. Availability brings a movement of miracles. He didn't ask them to go and say, there were. It was what was available that was used. A new level comes on availability. No wonder he told Moses, when he sent Moses to Egypt to go and conquer Pharaoh, he said, what do you have in your hand? We like to look for something else, but there is something in you. There's something available in you that he can use for a shift. A new level, a new glory comes on availability. It was what, and another striking thing from this particular verse is that, do you realize that this 6 water pot had already been reserved for something else? That's reserved. It was reserved for the purification of the Jews. There was ceremonial washing in their wedding ceremony. It was already reserved for something. You see, when you are following God, be ready for an interruption. Don't cling so much to the tools that he has given to you that you cannot be interrupted. Interruption commands miracles. I have been interrupted many times. I want to go this way, study this course, have a career, masters in population reproductive health. And just said, no, this is the way I need you to go. Many of you cling to the tools you think you own and forget that someone owns you. It was reserved for a purpose. It was reserved for a particular use. You know how you tell yourself that, tomorrow I will use this thing for this. And you have a plan. They had planned the ceremony. God is in the business of interrupting so there can be a transition in your life. Interruption. Transition comes on interruption. Shifts comes on interruption. Miracles comes on interruption. I remember when I went for a retreat, I've shared this many times, and I told God, I want to see something new in my life. I didn't plan refresh. Never had it in mind. But he said, check inside you. There is a seed inside you. I was planning other things about my life, and they are good plans, but they are not synced with God. Good plans. It's good to plan. Men should make plans. But don't make plans and don't allow your plans to be interrupted by his divine order or his divine command. And then right there where I was praying, that's where refresh was betted. There are many people here that God will bet something new in your life as long as you're ready to be interrupted. You don't believe it. That's why your amen sounds paralytic. You want something new, but you're not willing to be. You want all of it arranged. God will misarrange you so that something new can be bettered. You want it arranged. It has to be in order. I told myself in 5 years' time I will be this. It was reserved for something, but even though it was available, thank God for the servant. They unreservedly used it. They're too reserved, too constrained, too comported. Some of you are too psychedelic, too planned. Your plans are psychedelic. They were set there for purification of the Jews. And he says, fill the water pots. He did not ask. You think he did not know? He knows what you want to do next, but he will interrupt your next. Availability comes on. A new level comes on availability. And you know the funny thing about God, I said it earlier, he will use the very things you see as insignificant to command miracle. One of my proteges, she's a very good spoken word artist, very good, very unique in her delivery. And so we ministered somewhere in the same church. And when in the office, we're having a conversation. And then she said, I said, God, your singing blessed me. She sings and then she does spoken word together. And I'm like, your singing touched me, it really touched me. And she said, no, I can't sing. My voice is, what do you call that voice that cracks? And then it's bars. I don't know, it's cracked bars. However, if like music ministers tell me that I don't know what I'm saying, but shall understand. If you don't understand me, the Lord give you understanding. And she said she cannot really. And I said, do you know the move you created? It wasn't me when I climbed up. You stirred an atmosphere. I said, your voice is an available tool for commanding a supernatural atmosphere. He will use the things that don't make sense. He will use the things that is common to you. God is in the business of using common things. Common people. Ordinary men. How do you even explain where, how? We talk about no wine, but yet 6 water pots. He will use your available. It doesn't need to make sense to you, but it's available for use.